manager. So congratulations to him. Next on presentations, we have Megan Starter from Hawkins Delafield, who is going to speak to us about plant management.
Plant management. I just want to stand on the X's and.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Council, residents. My name is Megan Sartor with Hawkins Delafield and Wood. We also serve as your bond counsel, so you might be familiar with Bob Feinfeld from my office. But I am in the public contracts and procurement group. So I've been with the firm for about 16 years, and I would say for about the last 8 or 9 years or so, we've been assisting municipalities and sometimes municipal utilities authorities with the sale of their water and or wastewater systems to private utility companies in New Jersey. So it's my understanding that the town is in the very early stages of possibly considering selling its wastewater system. And have the benefit of having Nancy and Jack, who have been through this process in Long Hill. So it was a similar situation. They sold just their wastewater treatment system to New Jersey American Water. So I'm here to give you some info about the sale process, what time frame you would be looking at. There are 2 potential ways to sell the system for municipalities in the state. And I'm really just going to focus on the one that involves a referendum. So in this, following this statute, the majority of the voters will have to either approve or not approve the sale of the system at the election in November. The other procurement statute is called WIPA. It stands for the Water Infrastructure Protection Act. And that really just applies to systems that are in distress, that have, a significant history of DEP violations, significant managerial issues, financial issues. And I just don't believe that that's the case here. But of course, if you wanted to look into that further, you could have an engineer, do the analysis. But it just seems like that wouldn't be applicable here. So, I have a short PowerPoint presentation that I prepared and, just kind of summarizes what the requirements, what the process would be like and what the timeline would look like. So Anthony, pull that up. Go to the next one. So in this procurement, we would be issuing a request for bids, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But in this case, we're not buying anything, so you're not awarding the contract to the lowest responsible bidder. You would be awarding the contract to the highest responsible bidder. And so, a request for bids would take about a month or so to prepare, and it would include a description of the borough's objectives, the description of the wastewater system, a summary of the procurement process, a timeline, bid forms, and a form of contract. And it will also identify information that bidders would need to provide with the bid. So their purchase price, qualification information, and just to go to qualifications for a minute, there are really only 3 or 4, probably 3 companies that are qualified to bid on this type of procurement. There's Aqua New Jersey, there's New Jersey American Water, there's Suez, which is now Veolia, and those are really the only 3 companies that are likely to bid on this. So it's not like you're going to issue this and get 20 different people, bids to sort bids. And I believe, does American Water already own the water system?
Yes.
In town? Okay, so that is the same situation in Long Hill. So they're probably the most interested in purchasing. But of course, I would expect to see the other 2 companies bidding as well. So in the sales, we would advise that you would include a copy of the sales contract in the request for bids. That way the bidders can review it, mark it up, and during the question and answer period, they can ask any questions or let us know if there's anything in there that's just, non-starter. But what I've seen other municipalities do is include provisions where they would require a rate freeze for a year or maybe 2 years after closing. And, it's even if you don't require that, it's most likely that the rates will be frozen just because, every 2 years or so they go into the BPU to make their rate case. And it takes a while for them to adopt new rates. So you're probably going to have a rate freeze for a couple of years after closing. But we would put in the contract a rate stabilization covenant where they would pretty much, comply, at least for the first 5 years or so, agreed to not increase rates by X% per year. You don't want to rate shock the ratepayers. Even if you didn't have that, I don't think that we can would allow it anyway. Typically, we include a transaction reimbursement payment in the request for bids. Usually it's about $100,000 to $200,000, and that pretty much covers legal fees, engineering fees, administrative costs. We've also seen cities and towns require that the purchaser employ all of the current employees at the wastewater plant. So I know you have several employees currently. You can also require that they undertake specific capital improvements. So depending on, if there is something that needs to be repaired, if there are more stringent permit requirements that they need to comply with, they, would be responsible for doing all of that. And they would submit with their bid information as to how much they expect to invest in the next, 10, 20 years. And I know in Bernardsville, there are a large percentage of properties that are not currently connected to the wastewater system. So, in Long Hill, for example, they had a similar situation. I don't know if it was quite as big of a percentage, but several areas of town weren't connected. And what we did is we required the purchaser to at least do a study once they closed to see how feasible it was to connect those properties to the system, assuming there's enough capacity in the system, if they wanted to be. Some residents don't want to be connected, but that's something that we can make a condition of the bid. Some other requirements: service to the borough facilities at no cost, just for probably a 1 or 2 year period after closing, at the same volume level that existed at closing. And a lot of times we require them to pave curb to curb on streets where the sewer connections are repaired or replaced. One other thing, and I'm not sure how your ordinance is currently set up, but sometimes if residents are responsible for repairs to the connection from like the main to the curb, once you sell the system, we make the purchaser be required to be responsible for that. And it's quite costly. I mean, it could be, $5,000, $10,000. So that's beneficial as well. This is just a brief summary of some recent municipal sales in the state. Salem is one that we're currently working on. They just passed their referendum in November of last year, and they are probably going to close in June of this year. It was interesting, they started out doing the WIPA process because they have a distress system. They have, they met all the criteria that needed to be met, and at the end of the day, they decided to go forward with the referendum process, just, for timing purposes, and various reasons. Somerville, Brook, Egg Harbor City. So far, Egg Harbor is the only WIPA sale that has closed to date in the state. And that I think, that was 2021. There's Long Hill, as we talked about earlier, Mount Ephraim, and Haddonfield, which I believe was the first sale back in 2015. And that was New Jersey American Water. So this is the tentative procurement timeline that I put together. If the town decided that you did want to move forward with issuing a request for bids and receiving bids, a lot of things have to happen before the election in November just to get the ballot question submitted to the clerk on time. There's a mid-August deadline for when you would have to submit the question. So we're working backwards from the election day. Mid-November is when you would have to send the ballot question to the clerk. And before that happens, you would have to pass an ordinance. So you could do first reading in June, second reading in July, and get the ordinance passed. And that would approve the ballot question to be sent forward to the clerk. But the first step would be to decide if this is something you want to move forward with. Next, you would have to issue or pass a resolution authorizing the bid process. And I believe when I put this together, I looked at your calendar, so I used dates where you already have scheduled meetings. But of course, I know summer is coming up, and people have vacations, so if needed, special meetings could be scheduled to pass the ordinance, and for the various activities. But I just highlighted some of the more important things in the timeline here, just to, focus on what needs to happen. So assuming, if the town wanted to move forward, March and April would be, preparing the request for bids, putting in those specific town requirements that you would want to see the purchaser comply with into the bid document, putting together the draft contract to attach to the RFP. And under the statute, there's a pretty strict advertisement schedule. You have to issue, you have to advertise in 3 different publications for, every week for at least 6 weeks. So it's a pretty onerous, advertising requirement. But within those 6 weeks, there's a bidder question and answer period. And you've probably experienced this before with other requests for bids that you've issued. But this one, I promise, you will get the most number of questions you've ever seen. So you'll probably get hundreds of questions about, every detail about the system, how old all, pieces of equipment are, everything, just anything you can think of. And so that's why it's important in the beginning, this March, April timeframe, to just gather as much information as possible to put into the bid specifications so that we can give that information to the bidders so that they have it. And then once they come to the site, bidder tour and site meeting, they will have, hopefully not as many additional questions.
Just a quick question about that, if you don't mind. So they ask our engineers and our personnel the questions instead of coming in and inspect themselves?
They do both.
They do both.
Yeah, they come in, they inspect. It's probably like an all-day site tour where they visit every component of the plant, the entire system, and then they'll issue written questions as a follow-up. They'll probably ask for maintenance records for the past 5-10 years, things like that.
Nice question too, about the RFP.
Sure.
So great presentation, thank you. Does the RFP automatically commit you to selling it if it passes the referendum? In other words, is there another opportunity after it passes, if there's any other marker for the borough, just in case new information comes to light?
Right, so it's a great question. It doesn't, so once you issue the RFP, you're not committed to, once the bids come in like mid-June, if the bid prices are too low. So for example, if you have $5 million of debt on the system and the bids come in at $3 million, you don't have to move forward, you can reject all bids. That takes place in June. Once bids are received, and assuming you do want to move forward, when you pass the ordinance to go through referendum, I believe at that point you are committed to move forward with it. So I think the critical time point is mid-June when the bids come in, because once you pass the ordinance, you move forward with the sale. Once assuming the referendum passes in November, you've already authorized the execution of the agreement.
So that's a really interesting question, because we don't see we see a lot of the capital requests. I don't think we see the internals of the finances. Does the plan have outstanding large notes?
It does have debt. I can't remember, I gave it to them.
I think you said 15 million was the total.
15 million,
Oh,
Not just wastewater.
No, that's total debt for the town.
Yeah, what's the bill?
Wastewater was,
I don't know the portion of wastewater.
I think wastewater, I want to say like 4
okay.
million. I'll check on that. I have it sometime.
So just to move on, did you have any other follow-up?
That was a good, no, thank you.
Yeah, so the bids would be due in mid-June, and like I mentioned, in August 16th, that's the date that's the deadline for getting the question to the county clerk. So assuming you wanted to move forward with one of the bids, the highest bid, and you pass the ordinance, you'll get the question to the clerk in mid-August. And then between August and November, whoever the purchaser is, they will spend a significant amount of time and money on a public campaign to get the referendum passed. Of course, they would ask that the township partner with them in getting voters out there and getting this passed. And there can be opposition. It depends. Like sometimes there are independent organizations like Food and Water Watch that sometimes come out and try to encourage people not to vote in favor of it. It's mostly on the water side though, so this just being wastewater, it's not as likely that there will be such strong opposition, but you never know. And, okay, so then November 5th, that would be the election. If the referendum passes, the contract would be signed shortly after that. And then between December and around June, there were several, pre-closing conditions that have to occur. Mostly the purchaser would be responsible for, they have to get the contract approved by the BPU. So at the end of the day, the city, the municipality and the purchaser can agree to whatever terms they want to, but the BPU has to approve the entire contract. So it has to, we kind of know from experience what they've agreed to and what they push back on. So, it hasn't been an issue that I'm aware of, but that's out there, like everything was contingent upon the BPU approval.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why would someone want to buy it?
Good question. Like I said, there's only three, there's pretty much only 3 or 4 companies that would want to buy it. And they, at least with respect to New Jersey American and Aqua, for the past, almost decade, they've just been trying to acquire almost, as many systems as they can in the state, especially where they also own the water system. And they recoup their full, whatever purchase price they bid, they recoup 100% of that. They spread that cost over their entire rate base. So, for them, and as well as all of the investments that they put into the system. So it is very, and they bid quite high on certain systems. I don't know if you, recall that one slide where I had, 21 million for Egg Harbor and Haddonfield, I think was 28, and it's a small system. So I don't know exactly how they calculate what their purchase price, what their bid price is going to be. But it is very, very.
This is an important question, I guess, is the point. You said they amortize the cost over the rate base. It's the rate base across across the state.
Right.
Yeah.
So they don't amortize it across the
Just on
borough.
the parts.
And they can't by law, correct? So if they spend $20 million, they may amortize that across 40 million lives.
Right. And that's why it's easier for them to invest $20 million into your system, whereas it'd be much harder for the town to do that.
Right.
Because we would have to spend over just the township.
So obviously, if you went forward with this, and I guess I'm looking at Nancy, we would clean up the balance sheet first issue that's over there. Are there restrictions like Green Acres does it go into capital funds? Are there any financial restrictions on whatever revenues remaining?
Well, it requires that you have the sewer debt first, and then any other debt that you have. And I just looked, we actually have 22 million total, but 5 of it's unfunded. It's that open space. I hope not to spend all of that, but, so it's guaranteed. Is that 17? So there will be nothing left over to go into the general fund.
So it would just clean up debt.
It would clean up debt, and by the way, because I know your next question is gonna be, what about bonds that aren't due yet? What you have to do is hire a company like Phoenix or somebody, and they hold money,
They wash the
and
money.
you pay them and you're done, yeah.
There's one last slide, just, issues to discuss in the event that the township wanted to move forward. And that first bullet is potential borough requirements. So like I mentioned before, there's that list of things that we can put into the request for bid, such as them being responsible for the main, from main to the curb. If there's like an existing senior discount that's in place on in your ordinance, they can do it, ask them to honor that for at least, X amount of years following closing. And those are things that we want to put into the RFP so that they know what they're bidding on. We want to identify necessary preparation activities. And the only one that really comes to mind is an engineer assessment. I don't know, Nancy, if you have anything currently, but if not, it might make sense to have an engineer go ahead and do, a condition assessment of the current plant and the equipment, just like a list of inventory. Because if you don't do it up front, they are going to come back and ask you all of those questions during that bit of part of the answer period. And I think it's necessary for them to have that information in order to put the bid together. We also have to identify factors that can affect the procurement. So in some municipalities, they have grants or loan money from federal, USDA. I don't know if that's applicable here or not, but if so, you would have to talk to the USDA after the referendum passes, of course, about repaying the loans or putting together, possibly repaying any grant money. In some towns, there are portions of the collection system that are in other towns, so that may or may not be applicable here, probably not. But if so, sometimes those other towns have to pass ordinances allowing municipal consent to the purchaser to access the pipes or whatnot. And permit issues, existing debt, which we talked about, capital modifications, and other things that might be unique to the borough. So that's pretty much it. If anyone has any other follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer.
Did you want those issues discussed tonight?
I have a question, general question about, you mentioned opposition before about from different organizations, maybe residents as well. Like what opposition have you received in the past from other?
So in the past, there's general opposition to just privatizing, period. So sometimes certain residents, or it's not really the food and water wash, not really the organizations that are against it, but a lot of times they want, they see the water and wastewater system as an asset of the town, and they want the town to continue to own it and control it, because once you sell, it's permanent. You can't buy it back. So it's pretty much the loss of control. That's their major issue with it.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say, Longview was based part on misinformation, but that was nothing. Word got around that the Longview was in the bubble that if they didn't sell the plant, they wouldn't have to build any mountain houses.
If only.
You really just said that in public, so now that rumor just started here, right?
So what happened is Long Hill, they said that they thought they were bluffing about plan improvements needed, but then the township committee adopted an ordinance, the bond ordinance for $7 million for the improvements that were required by DEP and calculated the rate increases that would be needed. So the referendum was voted down in 2016, and in 2019 it passed 2-1 once the misinformation was.
That's right. I should have mentioned that in Long Hill, they tried to do the referendum first and it didn't pass. And then 2 years later, they did it again and it overwhelmingly passed, because at that point, the township committee passed an ordinance increasing the rate significantly. And that. pretty quickly-
Infrastructure.
So, how many other towns are out to bid right now? And then another question is like, how many have gone out to bid and either have been rejected or no responses potentially, where like,
Right, to my knowledge, there are no other towns there may be a dozen towns right now that are in the exact same position that we're in, because this is really the critical time for planning, because if you want to get this on the ballot in November, X, Y, and Z have to happen, you would have to issue the request for bids by latest early May. So this is really like the planning phase, I feel like, for a lot of towns. We won't really know for sure until May or June, what towns actually went forward and issued the request for bid. I am certainly not working with any other towns at the moment for this year. We're working with Salem right now, who just passed their referendum in November 2023, and they're closing in June probably this year. In the past, I would say there's probably a dozen or so that have done it already, that have closed between 2015 and now. Starting with Haddonfield, that was the first one. And there's probably about 2 or 3 every year.
and how many have gone out that have been rejected or not responded to from?
The only one that I'm aware of was Long Hill that went out the first time and was rejected. And then when they got the second time, it did pass. I know there's at least 1 or 2 others that have also gone out and the referendum failed, and then they just decided not to sell it like that.
Well, what about not the referendum, but actually the bid
The bid
responses?
response, I've not heard of any bids not coming in for anything from the.
Were being rejected by,
Well, some bids, so in Salem, we did reject, there were two bids that came in. New Jersey American Water was the highest responsible bidder, but they also received a bid from Aqua and their bid was non-compliant. So they had to reject that bid, not based on, just based on them not coming together.
Right. Doing it properly.
Question for, I guess, for all three of you, for the benefit of the public, what are the pros and cons of the decision?
Well, speaking from experience, if you have an under-functioning plant, the management of the plant is kind of a nightmare, and the amount of money, it's a money pit. We don't have that here, but it's an old plant. I mean, we're looking at spending, $750,000 on like a pump next year. Which, by the way, Leslie texted me because I asked her, and she said the sewer plant, I was way off. 870,000.
Okay.
I was right, that's just the sewer plant, but the rest of it was right. Anyway, another major advantage to selling is that, in my opinion, towns should not be in the business of managing sewer plants. Companies like the ones that Megan mentioned, it's all they do. And so they know how to do it more efficiently, more effectively, and provide better service to residents. The pipes in the road are old. I know that in Long Hill, as soon as New Jersey American bought it, they came and they relined all the pipes, which is a multi-million-dollar thing we never be able to do. Another huge advantage is the ability to pay off debt. And here, there's no way it would be all of the debt, but it would be a significant portion. And so what it does, it opens up so much money in your budget that you currently use for debt service to be able to buy capital, not, everybody's like, well, you should lower taxes, but then that creates a hole in your budget. So really what you can do with it is you should be able to reduce future budgets by using that money that you would have spent on debt service on buying things like capital, so you don't have like one-time revenues coming in. So to me, those are the advantages. The disadvantages are that the employees that are there, while they do get most times better jobs, better paying jobs, perhaps better pensions, they lose the time they have in the pension system. They do take their contributions with them. So that's the downside for them. The downside from residents' perspective, which I have not seen really come true, is, well, now we lose control of, the rates. And that's not necessarily true because, first of all, the Board of Public Utilities has to approve all rates. A disadvantage, no offense to anybody here, but a disadvantage to having the governing body set the rates is you want to keep them low because nobody wants to have to raise people's sewer rates. So as you keep them low, it kind of eventually ends up hurting the sewer plant because you don't have the money that you need to put into it, in order to keep it going. So.
Well, can I add, because look, I've unfortunately or unfortunately been through a couple of rounds in the finance committee of rate change approvals, of also dealing with capital expenses on the plant itself. A big piece of this that is, I want to make sure that residents understand, is amortization of costs across a giant population. She was talking about a $750,000 pump. When you divide that by 3,000 or 3,500 homes, those things are real and the plant is getting old.
how many connections though are there versus number of homes that we have?
Well, there's only about half. So there's about 1,800 connections, and I believe there's a little more than 3,000, 3,200 homes. It's almost exactly half.
Yeah.
Because up on the mountain, there's, septic, there's no sewer.
If we were to put a requirement in the bid to serve, to expand the sewer to other neighborhoods that may be on septic at this point, wherever they are, is there any restriction, because it sounds like we have to pay debt down first. So isn't that a way to get around paying debt down? Do they make you pay the debt down before you can exercise that requirement?
System, then it's on the purchaser to then be responsible for connecting, they would be the owner of the system, so that then, if we put that requirement in the request for bid, then they would do, they probably do an engineering study first to see how technically feasible it is to connect those properties. And they would commit to, maybe, X, like a dollar, like they might say, we'll invest $10 million into connecting those portions of the town that are not currently connected.
So hypothetically speaking, I don't think we're gonna do this, but I just am curious so if we put a requirement in saying you have to connect every property in Bernardsville, and they come back to us and they say, well, we'll pay you $1 for the sewer then you really only have $1 to go after the debt service. You still could execute.
It depends, that's what the question and answer period is for, because, we can put that in the document, we can put that in the contract. They might come back and tell us during the question and answer period, it's not possible.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened in Long Hill, and what they did come back with is they said that they would commit to doing this, performing a study upon closing within the first year or two after closing. And then after that, investing X amount of money into connecting whatever properties are can feasibly be connected.
Got it.
And the plan has to also have capacity for these additional connections as well.
Yeah, Long Hill requires 95% of the county's sewer, but they have a rule of thumb, they have to have so many connections per linear foot.
Yeah,
So Vernon or Long Hill doesn't have the amount.
But we could maybe
So
do
they
it.
would not, it wouldn't even be practical.
yeah, no, I understand. I just,
Should we ask them to do an assessment as to where it might be practical? Because obviously we have areas along 202 that aren't connected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure Megan is.
And Mount Airy.
informed.
Yeah, yeah.
I get a lot of people on Mount Airy, Dayton, Preston,
yes,
that area.
Yeah.
You can throw a baseball in here at my house.
That
I don't know.
seems like, if, the feasibility study to me seems like a major plus.
Right.
Because I get a lot of questions and, I don't wanna say complaints, but requests for people that wanna hook up.
Well, some of them are still on cesspools back there.
Can you do that as an alternate or?
It's tough with the request for bids because it's hard to compare, apples to apples, with the alternate. We could try to figure something out. The only problem is that, these assessments take time. So, it might take them a year or 2 years to do this study. And then at the end of the 2 years, they might conclude we can connect 20% max, and it's hard to, you can't really select based on. We can definitely put the requirement in. There's just not enough time to know beforehand that's feasible. You could independently have an engineer do that assessment before you issue RFP, if you want to have a better idea. That's something that.
I wonder if that's been done already.
There are some, I don't know about the feasibility. But
I think that might be, for some neighborhoods.
It's
John,
very possible.
May
John
have-
John has a lot of
because he
information
gets
that,
so many requests, I can't.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, another thing that we're talking about, how much capital. We just, I think it's on this agenda or on the last one, where you're entering into an agreement with Somerset County, to fix the Morrison Avenue pump station, and that is $750,000 just for that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we got a grant, that was from back from COVID money, but if we didn't have a grant, that would be money that we have to spend.
no, we don't have to pay that back if we were
We do
to.
not have to pay them. And, we're supposed to have, we have to be outbid by the end of the year, so I don't even know if they decide to do this, how that would be impacted.
Just a little context on that, which I think is important. That's approximately a 5% hit to a municipal budget in out of pocket. So, we try as a council to maintain the tax base increases less than, we try to shoot for 2 to 3%. If you have a 5% out of pocket that is sudden, all of a sudden those possibilities go away very quickly.
In that case, you would probably raise the rates because it's one of the.
We would have raised the rates to
Yeah.
offset the tax rate burden. So what is the plan here? Do we do this at the next work meeting? Do we talk about it, the details here? Do we?
Seems like a work meeting thing to me, but I don't know.
Looking at the schedule's not up there. Timeline wise,
You said we have time-ish,
just March.
right? Like, right.
It's 2 months.
So,
Would be
yeah,
time to prepare, if you decided
So-
to move forward to prepare the RFP and pass the resolution, I would say the resolution should be passed by the end of April at the latest, and that's when you're formally, deciding to move
Yeah.
forward with the procurement.
Do we need
so
to-
let's put it on the work meeting for March.
And
Mhm.
But are we gonna need them to approve, spending money with an engineer
We have.
for that meeting?
We have one.
Or you're just gonna,
We, I know that we contract with, PSNS for the sewer, so if you wanted me to ask them. I know John had some information on the condition assessment, so I'd like to see what he has so far, I don't know if that's
Yeah,
good enough.
we can see what he has, and, I'll compare it to other condition assessments, and see if there's
See, it's
addition,
complete enough.
to the RFP or if it's only.
Right, and then, and then I can find out how much they would even charge to do that. I don't, because we contract with them, do we have to,
That's right, you took say all of us.
And their services?
so I'll find out how much it would be.
so the
Do we need
resolution,
to retain their services as well, Nancy?
Sorry.
At this point, we need to retain their services as well, at this point?
Well, I,
We have to
We-
retain property checks, because we only retain them now through the bond council. Specific.
Yeah, but
But it just has to expand their contract.
Can that be through resolution? Do we have to have it?
so that would be during the work session, we could
Well,
start talking about it
Yeah.
a month from now.
Yes.
yeah,
I got more question. So it's the resolution to put together the basically to start to assemble the RFP. And then what's ordinance?
So once the bids come in, so let's say we issue the request for bids in early May, it has to be out for at least 6 weeks per the statute. So mid-June, the bids would come in, and if you are happy with the highest bid and you want to move forward, the next step would be to have a meeting where you would adopt an ordinance to submit the question to the clerk for the ballot and to authorize executing the contract if the referendum passes.
So the only formal way for the public to engage in the process directly are the election and this ordinance, the public hearing.
Right, so the ordinance would be, the resolution, I guess, in April, would be the, their first opportunity.
all those public meetings.
Yeah.
Oh, there is. Okay, that was my question.
So-
What are the public meetings?
The winning RFP, the company usually does public meetings, they told us.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Got it.
so between,
Focused
once you adopt the ordinance and before election day, whoever the purchase, whoever the winning bidder is, they will have a pretty aggressive campaign. Town hall meetings, knocking on doors, and really just trying to get the word out there, and try to get as many doors as possible.
Considering that we only have about 50% of our residents on, referendum originally would sound great.
Right.
But why would the other 50% care unless they were in this feasibility range that maybe they could get on sewer if they wanted to do that?
Right, we guys spoke about this, it's a good question, and they might not, they might not vote, they might not care. I don't think they would be against it because it doesn't hurt, it wouldn't
Doesn't
hurt them.
affect them.
I would think that one reason they'd be in favor of it is because it would free up so much debt. And you would pay off so much debt, and then it would free up the budget for other things that might affect them.
Yeah, I mean, and if we have been charging across all tax base for improvements to the sewer, but then only getting,
We haven't been doing it. It's all this.
Connection.
it's only been for the utility. Okay.
Sewer, yeah.
Right, so I don't think it would negatively impact them, but it could potentially positively impact them.
Mhm.
Thank you.
But as long as they need to be educated about that, because they might just assume it doesn't affect me, I'm not connected to sewer. And again, whoever the purchaser is, they will make a strong effort to get them at least to make that type of function.
Just to put this, I guess, in the back of Nancy's head, as we're thinking of this, is there anything that's structurally that we can build? It's a god awful eyesore as you drive into this town. Is there anything structurally that we can build in this RFP where they can improve either the aesthetic, cover it? I don't do wastewater management for a living. But
Yeah.
as we're thinking about it, is there something structural that that the town could never do to make it go away?
We can it doesn't sound like a huge investment, so
Yeah.
I think it's something we'd be happy to do. Again, they will recruit
If
it.
anything, just a
Whatever.
block you know, to.
Like the, I mean, maybe like, like those balls they put up on.
On the highways.
I don't know, something that's nicer than it is now.
Yeah.
If I could just for 1 second, I just wanna, just clarify something I said. I said that one of the advantages was that a private company could run the plant better than the town can. That was not, disrespect to our employees, because they do a great job. It's just that this is their business and they have way more resources.
They
But our,
buy 5 pumps, not just one.
right, and so our plant guys are great.
And they're not, they don't have our DPW digging the hole.
Yeah.
Excellent.
All right, we're good. So we'll have this on the work meeting for March.
Thank you,
Thank you so
really
much,
appreciate it.
Megan. This
Thank
was
you.
a lot of good information.
And feel free to follow up if any questions come up in the meantime.
Thank you. And actually, did you have her, presentation? Maybe you could get copies of it.
Yeah,
Everyone, thank you.
and post it on the Borough website.
Yeah, maybe put it on the website so people wanna see it. Okay.
Are we allowed by law to chop up